afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on ransomware, part of the Let's Talk series by Novosco. I'm your presenter this afternoon, Mal Toner. I'm a solutions architect with Novosco, been with the company just over 3 years. And today, as I've already said, we're going to talk about ransomware. So let's start off with a brief agenda. What we aim to go through today is give you some idea of what ransomware really is, the big picture around ransomware, and the myths that are associated with ransomware and the control of it. Then we're going to look at what can you do to remediate the environment in the event of ransomware. What can you do to prevent the ingress of ransomware into your environment? And finally, what can you do following a ransomware attack to recover the stability, functionality, and data of your IT systems within your company? Finally, we'll talk about endpoints and how they are affected by ransomware. You know, ransomware doesn't always hit the big corporate systems. Sometimes it just hits the user endpoints. As you probably already know, today's webinar is sponsored by Veeam, so there will be a Veeam take on some of the slides today, and we'll be talking about, how Veeam can help you in the ransomware. And I know that a lot of people are thinking, oh, well, Veeam's backup software, but that will become clear as we go through the webinar. So first things first, the big picture and the myths. So ransomware, as its name is a piece of malicious software that is going to somehow restrict access to files or your computer systems and elicit a payment out of you. So they may use scare tactics, and there are examples of this across the web where when you hit certain websites you get pop-ups saying, phone this number, you're infected, pay this fee to Interpol, whatever. There may be restrictions to data through encryption of the data, or provide access to data through, changes to the encryption of data. Now, ransomware, it's a real thing. It's been around for quite a while. It's had a resurgence maybe in the last year or so. You can see in 2016 the number of instances on our graph here compared to back in 2005. But it's been around for a while, and it isn't just a Windows thing. A lot of people believe, ransomware is because of the ineffective security lockdowns in Windows, and Unix and Apple solutions are much more secure. In truth, ransomware is a business for organizations that are out there trying to hack and make money off the back of it. So there's two things they're going to do here. They're going to hit the vulnerable systems, agreed, but they're also going to hit the systems with the biggest attack surface. And by attack surface, I mean user density. What is the point of targeting a mainframe system with ransomware? Yes, you're absolutely right. Big organizations use big mainframes, but there's probably only, hundreds of thousands that they could target in the UK? Whereas if we target organizations that use Windows Server, then we're hitting hundreds of thousands of organizations. It's around ransomware. So let's take these through. So I've got 7 mythical creatures to go through here: Medusa, Yeti, the unicorn, the little mermaid. I myself live in Wales, so the Welsh dragon's got to be on there. So let's have a look at these. So Yeti, ransomware equals zero-day attacks. So going back to what I just said a few minutes ago, to orchestrate a zero-day attack takes a lot of time and effort to identify that weakness in the first place, to generate something that will take advantage of that weakness, and then to hit it out there is a lot of time and effort. The truth is, these organizations are in it for the money. So what they're going to do is they're going to take the easiest access route, and 9 out of 10 times it is taking advantage of maybe someone's inability to secure email, someone's inability to secure downloads, and taking advantage of users. Endpoint protection gives you all the visibility necessary to recover from a malware infection. Endpoint protection systems really work on identifying what they believe to be risky software based on heuristics, based on past track records, based on stuff like that. Endpoint protection systems, in truth, can't scan encrypted files. So if your email system allows a user to get an encrypted file through, and then they double click that file, then you may be subject to a breach. So do they necessarily give you all the visibility? No. Do you need them? Hell yes. Yeah, they are a good first point of security. So we'll move on now. Who's next? It's the unicorn. Backups are perfect and contain everything. So let's take two tacks on this. Number one, backups are not always perfect, and number two, do they contain everything? Why aren't they always perfect? Well, backup is the least glorious bit of IT. It is the bit that when you wander in on a Monday morning and something's gone wrong, your first thought process isn't, did last night's backup works? It's the printer's jammed, the sales department need it working, get on there, get it fixed. Yeah? Halfway through the day, you might remember that your backups didn't work. Halfway through the day, you might remember that they did work. Halfway through the day, you might even think about checking if they worked or not. So they're not always perfect. And do they contain everything? Well, that's debatable. It all comes down to what you're backing up, when you're backing up, and how frequently you're backing it up. Since we paid for the latest endpoint protection system, we have the latest endpoint protection system. Not always true. Yes, it's very easy to update endpoint protection systems on PCs and so forth. Yeah, and we can have that automated. But in another respect, is the PC online? Has a user gone over to France for a conference, over to America for a conference? Is your endpoint protection update system designed to protect them when they're just sitting generically out there on the internet? From a server perspective, it may not be as easy to always go through and update endpoint protection engines. Yeah, the data files, the signature files are easy enough, but actually getting scheduled downtime to update an endpoint protection engine, actually taking that risk that you may sometimes have, that you've got to remove one old endpoint protection system to put on another, so you effectively have to shut that system into some sort of air gap to make sure that during that deinstall and install process you're not at risk. Your EPP will protect you from all threats. So I've sort of touched on this one already. Your EPP will protect you from all known and visible threats. Yeah? I don't know how many viruses are on my computer. I know that my endpoint protection system tells me that there are no known viruses on my computer at this point in time. So two things could be there. One, it could be hiding an encrypted file that I haven't opened yet and haven't scanned. Two, it could be a virus that was designed 2, 3, 4 months ago and is actually sitting there dormant until May the 4th be with you date next week. And at that point, this pseudo Star Wars virus, let's call it, is going to burst into life, and suddenly all the EEP manufacturers around the world are going to go, oh, this is the first time we've seen this. We better get a signature. That's an idea of a zero-day attack. So likelihood, maybe, maybe not, but you know, EPP is good protection, but it won't protect you from everything. Administrators follow the best practice all the time, every time. Let's go back to that Monday morning again. You've come in, the Wi-Fi's down, someone's screaming at you about that, the printers are jammed. Do you remember to follow your best practice of going, actually, we need to check that the backups are there, because if any of these things actually explode and we end up with the system down, we need the backups to recover the business. No, you rush on and do the other thing. When you're doing the other thing, you're suddenly logged in as an administrator onto the Wi-Fi system, onto the print server, or whatever, and suddenly you think, oh, I just need to send an email to the support people. So I open up my email account. So at this point, we've now breached my email account into full admin access in the network. So if there's anything lurking or mischievous in my email that I accidentally open, I've given it full admin access to my network. So we should follow the best practice. We try to follow the best practice, but like users, administrators are only human. Firewalls, secure web gateways, secure email, gateway, and other perimeter solutions are all you need. They're definitely something you need, but they're not all you need. Is your firewall on your perimeter going to protect your end user device when they're sitting at home on their Sky broadband account or TalkTalk broadband account or whatever? Does your email gateway protect you if a user uses a web server, web browser to open a personal email account? Yeah, so they are part of the story, they're not the whole story. So, as we said, ransomware has been around for a while. 2004 is when we started to see CryptoLocker, I apologize, 2014 is when we started to see CryptoLocker, CryptoWall, that sort of stuff come in. But 1989 is when PC Byborg, which was an AIDS Trojan, first hit the networks. Some stats for you here. If you look at the CISO's report and CEB analysis, 1 out of every 2 breaches is a result of employee behavior, not a failure of the endpoint protection or perimeter protection. Phishing email attacks, success rate is around about 60%, yeah, and 20% in trained staff. 50% of users will open a link without even thinking about it and open it within the first hour. Cyber criminals just don't go after big companies. 2014, 59% of the targeted companies were less than 2,500 employees. And this is the best one. This is from Robert Muir, who is director of the FBI, and he basically said there are only 2 types of companies: those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. Yeah, and that's quite a scary thought. So, you know, for those of you out there thinking about ransomware, for those of you that have been hit, I feel sorry for you. For those of you that haven't been hit, and those of you been hit, I say prepare for when you get hit. Not if you get hit, when you get hit. This hits every sector. Higher education, you can imagine they have a massive footprint from ransomware, hence why you see a lot of staff and student information being segregated into different physical networks. Finance services, energy sector, that's scary as hell. Imagine if SSE, one of the big power people, got hit by ransomware and could no longer process your electricity bills. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Anyway, everything, every sector is as open to ransomware as any others. On some sectors, financial services have got some very good compliance laws against the organizations, which helps them justify security measures that help them with ransomware. But other organizations maybe don't have that compliance, and therefore, as a result, may not necessarily have the funding forthcoming, I should say, to justify the expenditure to protect against ransomware. So putting some costings against this, these values were originally in dollars, so I've transferred them into pounds so that we can get a true idea of what they mean. So for most organizations, the average cost, and this is a standard, of an hourly downtime is £62,000, and £70,000 is the average hourly cost of data that's been lost. And ignoring availability costs enterprises in 2016, £12.4 million. That was a £4.6 million on the 2014 figure. So remediation, what can we do to remediate from ransomware? Well, A, you can pay it. Be careful, because that doesn't always mean that you're going to get your data back. It's the old thing that once you've been blackmailed once, it's very easy to be blackmailed twice. B, you can restore the compromised data from backups. Ignore the ransomware, just take the hit and go, right, I need to go back to my most recent backup. And now you need to think about, right, when was my most recent backup, and how long does it take me to make that data active? But C, most importantly, you should always report it, yeah? The only way we are going to get serious amounts of money invested in protecting us at a protection government police level is if they understand the size of the crime, yeah? So always report. Now, I know that for some organizations, reporting and admitting you've been breached is going to be a nightmare, but let's be honest, guys, this has to be taken seriously. In all cases, prevention is always better than cure, yeah? So educate your workforce, educate your IT teams. It's not just a threat to the IT server estate. Most of the ingress points are through the user environment. User passes it on, then someone with more security opens a file that they've infected, and that passes it up another layer, and so forth and so forth. Check on a routine basis that your permissions within your environment are up to scratch and people don't have access to files or shares they shouldn't have. So for example, and I'm not going to name the organization here, but in the last 2 years I've dealt with an organization where they got hit by ransomware, and when we tracked it down, it was basically the FD who had near enough access to, let's say, 60% of the system had received the ransomware. The ransomware was an email in the format of an invoice. It said, your invoice is attached. Yeah. The name of the company in the invoice looked genuine. It was someone that the organization dealt with, but he wasn't aware that the invoice, as the finance director, was due. So he sent it on to the managing director. The managing director again wasn't sure, so they both decided, and bear in mind the managing director had access to about another 30% of the files that the FD didn't. So here we're covering 90% of the data inside the organization. The managing director said, I wasn't expecting it. The FD said, well, I wasn't expecting it. So they said, well, shall we have a look and see what the invoice is for? And both individuals, near enough at the same time, on the phone to each other, double-click the attachment. Bang, 90% of the file system hit by ransomware. Update. Keep your systems up to date. Keep your backups up to date. Keep your antivirus up to date. Keep your security patching up to date. I know it can be a real nightmare to update some applications sitting on some servers and get the business downtime, but planned business downtime is always, always, always better than unscheduled business outage due to a ransomware hit. Backup. Make sure your data and pertinent is backed up. And by data and pertinent, I just don't mean, pertinent data. I just don't mean the data itself, but possibly the applications that access the data that could be vulnerable to being ransomwared, the operating systems. Also, make sure that none of your backup sets and none of your backup NASs are accessible to generic users. Now, I do know that some people say, well, if I make my backup, for example, a snapshot on a NetApp CIF server or whatever, accessible to a user so that they can restore their own files in the fact it gets deleted, haven't I also just made my backup susceptible to being breached by the user? So, yeah, it might be okay if it's a read-only backup, but you just got to be careful. And finally, in the event you do get hit, and that's not a if, it's a when, even if you're lucky enough and never get hit, yeah, let's think about that, never get hit, you should always work on the premise that you will get hit, because unless you work on that premise, you will not be prepared for it when it happens. So data recovery. So we always like to, in Veeam, talk about, and we talk about the 3-2-1 approach. This is a methodology in regards to protecting your data that should always, always get you out of the failure scenarios, yeah? The 3-2-1 approach basically is based on 3 copies of your data with at least 2 separate types of media, based with one of those medias being off-site in a physically different location, should lead to no errors and no loss of data. So here's an example where we're showing you a tape or a virtual tape library solution where we're using Veeam to do a backup to tape and media. There's your media pool. We have a backup set that goes out to the media pools. The nice thing about Veeam is it's effectively, when there are changes, the changes are recognized, they're added to the backup set, they're sent out to the media pools. Yeah? And there's our change block, and we can recover it back. Veeam also has this idea of a backup copy job. This is the idea where we can take a copy of the backups that are being done, and without retouching the source systems, simply touching the backups that are already there, progress those to an off-site repository. That offsite repository could be a number of things, and we'll come on to that in a second. But there's some quite clever stuff that Veeam does. Basically, Veeam will actually look at the last full backup, compare it to the next full backup, track the changes, put the changes into a backup copy job replication, send them across to the remote site, and at the remote site we generate the new full backup. For environments where we're possibly using restricted WAN access or even internet, Veeam had this idea of a acceleration engine for those types of connections. Again, what happens here is we take the copy jobs, we not only coalesce them into one, but we actually then do a compression and dedupe on them, send them over the line, and then add them into the backup job at the remote site. So it's a very effective use of the WAN link for transferring the data. Word of warning, not actually in high bandwidth, low latency environments can be slower than just letting the job do itself, yeah? So if you remember this methodology we had here where we're sending it directly over a link, if you are, let's say, more than 100 megabits, less than 25 millisecond latency, that is probably going to be faster than the second method, which allows for the the compression and dedupe before going over the link. Veeam have also introduced Cloud Connect. Cloud Connect is the idea that we can make our offsite repository a cloud provider, and that cloud provider can be one of the standard ones, AWS, Azure, whatever, yeah? The idea here is that we have a cloud gateway that effectively allows, in this case, we're talking about multi-tenancy, so this is an option that's available through ourselves at Novosco, where we offer you a cloud gateway through to a multi-tenanted environment, customer 1, 2, 3, and 4, and basically you then have your accelerators that work with our cloud gateway to provide you a path to your customer repository for your updates and backups. Now, earlier on in the webinar, we talked about how how endpoints can actually be the ingress point for a virus, a ransomware attack, whatever. We also talked about how the endpoints could actually be the attack surface, what is actually attacked itself. And up until quite recently, one of the lackings inside the solution that was offered by Veeam, which is a highly virtualized solution, is its ability to deal with physical endpoints. So this was combated. Quite a while ago, Veeam released a free endpoint backup tool that was aimed at the desktop marketplace. And quite recently, in the first quarter of this year, they've actually extended that agent to be a Windows and Linux agent available to deliver backup to Windows and Linux servers and desktops to your Veeam environment or any cloud backup environment that you use with Veeam through the Cloud Connector. So this enables workload mobility to allow workloads to move on-premise and off-premise, so you're no longer tied into backing up in your VMware state. If you shift a workload out to, or Hyper-V estate for that matter, if you shift a workload out to the cloud, you can still back it up. But it also allows you to back up physical endpoints, so those servers that you still just haven't virtualized, whether it be because OS or application support is lacking, or whether it be due to licensing issues for those of you out there using Oracle. So putting all of this together, we have what we call the Veeam Availability Platform for the hybrid clouds. So it works with Hewlett-Packard, Cisco, NetApp, Dell. It works with compute, storage, networking, hyperconverged. All of that sits underneath it. This sits at your hypervisor level, whether it be VMware or Hyper-V. It's the Veeam Availability Suite. It also gives you the Veeam Agent for Microsoft Windows and the Veeam Agent for Linux. It allows you to work with either private infrastructures or private clouds, like you might get with the Novosco single-tenant cloud. It also allows you to work with public cloud providers like Azure, like Google, like Amazon, or even VMware. Note there, VMware are selling off their cloud solution, so you know the slide's slightly out of date. And it allows you to back up to either on-premise or private public cloud environments. Yeah. So what this gives you is enterprise continuity. So it's a recovery service level objective of less than 15 minutes. So let's be honest here. How can I give you a recovery service level objective of less than 15 minutes? Well, one of the neat things Veeam can do, let's say, for example, you pick up your file server every hour on the hour with Veeam, and then 20 minutes past the hour, it gets hit by ransomware. So you know you're going to lose 20 minutes worth of work, but it's a big file server. How long is it going to take you to get it back? How long is it going to take you to restore all that data? Well, one of the nice things about Veeam is that you can actually mount the backup job as if it were the VMDK and boot the VM from that VMDK straight away. So we're talking about less than 15 minutes to get the whole environment back up. What then happens in the background is Veeam trickle feeds the data from the backup job back into your VM or Hyper-V environment. Yeah, so it gets you up. It gets you up quickly. It doesn't necessarily give you the full level of performance you have, because whilst we're trickle feeding into the live servers, even though the VM is up and it's running, it's reading the data from the backup media. So if your backup media is a NAS device that uses nearline SAS drives, whereas your live servers sit on SSD, you can see there's going to be a massive performance difference there. With the agent, it gives us workload mobility. So if I'm using Veeam at an agent level with inside a workload, even if that agent is virtualized with inside my VM or Hyper-V environment, I can move that workload to another Hyper-V or VMware environment, or indeed out of my environment into a public cloud. And that's what the agent delivers for us. And it gives us compliance and visibility. So the idea of having Veeam 1 and Veeam 1 Reporter give us proactive monitoring and reporting on the environment. So that's been our webinar on ransomware. As we say, protect and prevention is always better than cure, but be prepared to cure. And in our environment today, we've been talking about protection of the cure, or the ability to cure the breakout via fast recoveries using Veeam technology sets. So later on this month, well actually next month, I think it's the 25th of May, we'll be running the next in this series, which will be on disaster recovery, and then we'll be running another one in June. So look forward to seeing you there. Hope you found this useful. If anybody wants a recording of this webinar, then just let our team know at Novosco. If you've got any follow-up questions, please feel free to contact me. My email address is mal, that's M-A-L, .toner, T-O-N-E-R, at Novosco, N-O-V-O-S-C-O.com. Thank you.